Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you some of my favorite books that I read because of Booktube, and because there's not much more to say than that, let's get on with the video. So the first book I'm going to recommend is actually a trilogy, and it is the Selection Trilogy by Kiera Cass. There are two books that follow this trilogy, but I refuse to believe that they exist. I believe they're called The Heir and the Crown. I have absolutely no interest in reading those books, so I'm going to be talking about the first three. Now, if you've never read The Selection before, it follows our main character, America Singer. That is her real name. She is picked to be one of the 35 girls to basically court the prince, which his name is Prince Maxon, at the royal palace in Ilia, which is a futuristic take on America. Basically, drama ensues from there. This trilogy I can only sum up as the best literary young adult version of the show The Bachelor. It's absolutely everything that that show is, just in book form, and I could not get enough of it. I thought this series was great. I am very much aware that this series has very mixed reviews. A lot of people who really didn't like it, and a lot of people who really do, like me. I'm not saying that people who don't like this book, your opinion's not warranted, but I feel like a lot of people have, I guess, trepidation in reading this series because they see it, I guess, advertised as a dystopian, and I'm just here to tell you right now, this book, this trilogy, this series, not a dystopian. It happens to take place in a dystopian futuristic setting. It's not dystopian, not at all. And I'll also say the writing is not the greatest. The world building in this is very subpar. It also doesn't even pick up until about the second and third books, and again, it is mediocre at best. But for some reason, I just loved the drama. It was just great. I read this when I was moving from Oklahoma to Florida, and I guess it was a tumultuous period in my life because I was leaving all my friends and family behind. So this trilogy really helped me, I guess it really helped take my mind off of that situation just for a little bit, so maybe that's why I liked it so much. I don't know. Now, the next book I'm going to recommend also has received pretty mixed reviews, and it is We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I thought the story that is told in this book was so unique and original, and I was a huge fan of the ending, the plot twist ending. I'm sorry if you didn't care to know that there's a plot twist in this book, but there is. This book is really hard to summarize for me without either taking a really long time or without spoiling it. But I'm just gonna say it follows a family who vacations every summer on their own private island off of the coast of Martha's Vineyard, I think. And something happens during one summer that no one really talks about until the end, and I just really liked it. I think also a pretty polarizing aspect of this book, meaning people either loved it or hated it, was E. Lockhart's writing. She wrote in a very peculiar way. She had really choppy sentences that I feel like really added to the eeriness of the tone, the almost thriller atmosphere, and I was just a huge fan of how that played out in our story. Now, the next book I'm going to recommend is actually one of the first books I read after discovering Booktube, and it introduced me to now one of my favorite contemporary YA authors, and that is Since You've Been Gone by Morgan Matson. I believe at the time of reading this, I gave this either a 4 or a 4.5 rating, but I really enjoyed this story. If you don't know what this book is about, it follows our main character Emily, whose best friend Sloane disappears, which you kind of have to suspend your disbelief for that because this book was released in 2014 and social media was very much a thing by then, so I just feel like if someone moved to another place, it wouldn't be that hard to track him down, but I don't know. I think it addresses that she didn't have social media, but the odds of her parents not having social media, I don't know. I found that hard to believe. But moving on, we follow our main character Emily. She is mailed a bucket list, which it has it here on the back, that Sloane wrote out for her, and she believes that if she does all of the things on this list, somehow she'll find out where Sloane's gone. Emily was always more quiet and reserved, while Sloane was a lot more outgoing, and I just could relate to Emily so much. The fear of stepping out and doing things without your best friend around you is so heavily relatable, especially to me at the time of reading this, because I believe I was 18 when I read this book, so it definitely spoke to me. It was just a great subject to talk about, and I liked being able to see myself in the main character, so if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, I obviously recommend it. Also, every one of her other novels. And the next book I discovered through Booktube is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This is a great book. I believe I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. I don't know why I didn't give it a full 5. I think if I reread it, I probably would give it a full 5 stars, but whatever. If you don't know what this book is about, it follows our two main characters, Victor and Eli. They are college roommates at some made-up college in a made-up world, but there are humans that exist that are called EOs, or extraordinaries, which are basically this book's version of a superhero or sometimes supervillain, which the supervillain aspect I think is explored pretty well in this book. I believe the story starts during their senior year and they are just assigned research papers. I think they get to pick what they research, and Eli chooses to research extraordinaries and Victor kind of is like, I'll help you, and so they start experimenting on ways to become EOs themselves, and something tragic happens, but they both become EOs, but the tragic thing that happens splits them apart and they become pretty much enemies, and we follow our story from there. I absolutely loved how this book tackled anti-heroes and how it dealt with that. I loved the feud between Victor and Eli and the build-up. I will say, if you are more of a plot-driven reader, this book may not be your favorite because this is definitely a character-driven book, but that's all I really want to say because I think this book should be read without knowing too much before going into it. And also the second book, Vengeful, is coming out later this year, which I totally spaced and did not talk about in my most anticipated reads of 2018, but that is one of my most anticipated reads of this year, so I'll probably have to give this one a reread because I read this book so long ago. But yeah, I'm so excited for it. The next book is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. I read this book the summer of 2016 and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. I will say I read Eleanor and Park back in October of 2014, but I borrowed my library's copy, so I don't have a copy of that book, but I gave that one 5 out of 5 stars. The only thing is, I hardly remember anything about Eleanor and Park other than how it ends and the fact that the ending made me cry. But that's about it, so I feel like I need to go out and buy my own copy and read it again. But because I don't really remember much of it, I'm gonna talk about Fangirl because I read this one a lot sooner and I remember more of it. But we follow our main character, Kath. It's her first year at college and she is a lot like Emily from Since You've Been Gone. She is very reserved, very quiet, and she likes to write fan fiction on Friday nights instead of going out and doing the typical teenage scene, which is like parties and drinking and stuff like that. But the characters in this book were my favorite part. I'm very much a character-driven reader, if you can't tell already, but yeah. I really liked Kath. I liked how into fan fiction she was. I personally am not that into fan fiction, like at all, but I liked how the other characters that she came into contact with didn't necessarily look down upon her for that, especially Reagan and Levi. I absolutely adored their characters so much. Reagan's actually one of my all-time favorite side characters, so if you want to know more about my thoughts on her, I have a video where I talk about her a lot more than I'm going to in this video, so if you want to go check it out, please do. But yeah, I think this would be a great book to read if you're about to go off to college or if you're even already in college. I would recommend this one. Now the next book I'm going to talk about, you've probably already heard of and seen a lot on Booktube, but I will mention it very briefly for your sake and I guess mine. But it's Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Briefly what this book is about, we follow our main character Selena, who is released from the salt mines of Endovier, which is basically prison, to train to be the next king's assassin. It's like a competition thing that she wants to win because it grants her freedom after I think 4 years of serving him. Or 6 years, one of those amounts. So yeah, I thought it was really good. But the main reason why I wanted to talk about it in today's video is what this book did for me and the genre of fantasy and how it introduced us and how I have now found one of my all-time favorite genres. So basically, I think this book is great for fantasy beginners. If you're someone who's never read fantasy before, like I had never read fantasy before reading this book, I think this is a great introduction to fantasy, I guess, in YA. I'm slowly starting to read more adult fantasy. I'm currently reading Uprooted by Naomi Novik, which I believe is adult fantasy, so fingers crossed that I like that one. But I just really like fantasy, and this book helped me realize that. It is now one of my favorite genres along with contemporary, so that's why I thought this book was worth mentioning today. And the last book I'm going to recommend is Illuminate by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I actually read this book late in the summer of last year, so this is actually my most recent read. But I was so surprised by how much I ended up loving this book and the way that it's told, which if you don't know, I think I show the pages every time I bring up this book in my videos, but it's told in through documents and surveillance camera footage, interviews, and I feel like it only helped the science fiction aspect of this book. Again, I think my favorite part about this book were the characters. I admired Katie's bravery, even if towards the end it was a little bit a little bit irrational, but Ezra was definitely a joy and a treat. He was just so endearing and I loved him so much. I still need to read the second book, Gemina, but it's on my TBR for March because the third book, Obsidio, comes out in March. I'm very much looking forward to those two books to read soon. But yeah, I would highly recommend Illuminate a lot. Alright guys, that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for liking, commenting, and subscribing, and I hope to see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye! What was that?